Hi, everybody. First of all, I'd like to shout out to friends and family without naming names. Uh, uh, One friend in particular was very encouraging to me to continue doing this, even when I was somewhat uh, downtrodden by having a video censored by YouTube. So I came back at it, and last night's video was terrible technically as far as the sound and video synchronization. I can see I'm having the same problem tonight, and I'm going to work on finding a way to do this better. Um, in addition, I want to point out that below the video there are show notes. You might have to click the More button, um, and that's where I'm going to put the links to all my sources so that you can go and view the entire video for which I've taken a clip from, so that you don't think that I've done some kind of crafty edit like I showed you last night, and I may have more examples for you in the future. Also, I had some pictures that I used in this area of the screen, and I hadn't posted a link about those. Those were from Reuters, and they were published in an article, and I'll post that link tonight as well as update last night's show notes. So, all right, let's get to the clips.
Some bracing news we never expected to report. Black Lives Matter is now more popular than the President of the United States, and not slightly more popular than the President, much more popular. A survey this week by Rasmussen, a right-leaning pollster, found that 62% of likely voters now have a favorable opinion of Black Lives Matter. At the same time, Rasmussen found that Donald Trump's approval rating was 43%. That's almost 20 points lower. And by the way, Trump was not alone. Black Lives Matter is far more popular than Joe Biden is, too. It's more popular than America's religious institutions, all of them. It's more popular than the media, the Congress, and big business. Black Matters is more popular by double digits than both the Democratic and the Republican parties. It's almost as popular as the U.S. military. It's much more popular than the Pope. The numbers are astounding, but the polls are not the only measure of it. Here's a Black Lives Matter rally from over the weekend in New York. Look at that picture. That is an ocean of people. Ask yourself the last time you saw a candidate for office who was able to draw a crowd like that. The media, in their relentlessly fawning coverage, usually describe Black Lives Matter as an activist group or a protest movement. But that's deception by understatement. Black Lives Matter is not a collection of marchers with signs. It's not a conventional political lobby like Planned Parenthood or the NRA. It's not pressuring Congress to pass some narrow new set of laws. Black Lives Matter is far more ambitious than that. It is working to remake the country and then to control it. It's a political party. As of tonight, Black Lives Matter may be the single most powerful political party in the United States. Nobody says that out loud, but politicians understand it perfectly well. If nothing else, they understand power. They can smell it at great distances.
Okay, so he spends a lot of effort to demonstrate how popular Black Lives Matters is. And there's a good reason for that, because conservative-minded people, who I guess we should basically call them what they really are, is authoritarian personalities, believe that popularity is almost everything. It's very important to them. They like to be part of the in crowd. They want to be with the winners. And it's interesting because he's going to get to this in just another few minutes. Also, he then goes on to make some declarations about what Black Lives Matters is and is not. And I think he's right about one thing. Black Lives Matter should become a full-fledged political party, and maybe that would be the good starting point to disband this utterly corrupt Democratic Party. So let's carry on.
It's all pretty strange when you think about it. If the leaders of Black Lives Matter are political actors, and they are, then by definition, you are allowed to have any opinion you want to have about them. Black Lives Matter wants to run the country, therefore you can freely criticize Black Lives Matter. Those are the rules of our system, but not anymore. Imagine a world where you are punished for questioning the behavior of the president or for insulting your local mayor. You probably can't imagine that. It's too bizarre. It's un-American. But that's where we are right now. Black Lives Matter has changed the rules. And here's their first new rule: no criticizing Black Lives Matter.
Okay, so first he establishes the rules of being able to criticize Black Lives Matters, and then he explains that they've changed the rules now. There's no more criticizing Black Lives Matters. This is to appeal to your lizard brain, your sense of indignation that you may have experienced as a child playing board games with another child who cheated. Let's move on.
Black Lives Matter now enjoys almost complete immunity from criticism. This is unprecedented for an American political movement. But Black Lives Matter is even more powerful than that. It has single-handedly revised our moral framework. Yes, Black lives do matter. That is a statement of fact, and no decent person doubts that it is true, because it is. And it's true precisely because every life matters. We are all human beings, every one of us. We have souls. Skin color is irrelevant to moral value. Until recently, this was considered obvious. Saying it was regarded as a virtue. All lives matter equally. All of us were created by God. In the end, all of us will die. Nothing can change that. Not wealth, not fame, not race. Every life is precisely as valuable as every other life. And by the way, that idea forms the basis of the Christian faith. It's the entire premise behind our founding documents. And yet suddenly, thanks to Black Lives Matter, you can no longer say it out loud. Affirming the fundamental equality of all people is now considered hate speech. You can be fired for saying it. Again, many people have been.
Are you angry enough yet? This is what he's trying to do, is make you angry. You're not allowed to criticize Black Lives Matter, and you're not allowed to point out that all lives matter. I'm not going to get into his little argument. I'll just refer you to Sight Unseen. Ashton Kutcher white explains why you shouldn't use all lives matter as a counter to Black Lives Matter. I've seen him talk about things before. I trust that he has a sense of fairness and equity, and can probably explain this very well, and has millions of views or whatever. It's just not good, Tucker. And this is to not only make his viewers angry, but to promote this argument so that it can inflame the already existing tensions. Okay.
Affirming the fundamental equality of all people is now considered hate speech. You can be fired for saying it. Again, many people have been. This is a dangerous moment. How did we get here? In a word, quickly. It happened fast. As recently as December, before the riots, most Americans did not approve of Black Lives Matter. The group was defined in the public mind by moments like this.
Pigs in a blanket! Cry like bacon! Pigs in a blanket! Cry like bacon! Pigs in a blanket! Cry like bacon! Pigs in a blanket! Cry like bacon!
Pigs in a blanket fry like bacon. Kill the police. They yelled that at a rally. The usual liars immediately swooped in to pretend that it never happened. The president of the Southern Poverty Law Center wrote an entire op-ed ordering the public not to consider Black Lives Matter a hate group.
Okay, so I skipped the part of his argument where he talks about two examples of people who got fired for daring to use the all lives matter argument or something akin to it. You can feel free to follow the show notes and watch the entire Tucker Carlson clip. And I would encourage you to simply Google the people that he names and see for yourself that he's given you a very incomplete uh, version of the story that leaves out some important details and just leaves you feeling mad that somebody could be fired over this. And then uh, he moves on. He uses the term dangerous moment, and then proceeds to show us a clip from I believe 2015. um, and he's good. He has the date and time, etched in the well, on this side, I suppose, uh, of the video clip. Um, but then, as he talks about it, afterward, he says, uh, "Pigs in a blanket fry like bacon." Then he adds his own interpretation of exactly what they meant, which was it couldn't obviously be anything other than kill the cops. And he's kind of brought it back into this Black Lives Matters moment. So he's taken something out of context, and he said, and now we're at the point of kill the cops. That's what Black Lives Matters is all about. And so he goes on from there. This is standard Fox propaganda technique. It's something akin to this that they were just recently busted doing. This is from Rolling Stone, and it's a good article, and I'll have it in the show notes. So, let's move on. Okay, so here's this guy who was completely outside of my bubble before I started looking into this nonsense with Fox News Propaganda. And a friend of mine posted this online on Facebook, and I came across it. And, well, let's listen to what this guy has to say.
America's been deeply polarized by media propagandists and gaslighters and liberals who just, they're not on whatever side America's on, they're on the other side. There's no escaping this anymore. There are kids, teenagers, people in my own home under massive pressure to succumb to false media narratives, to outwardly show support for people who've come out with messages like pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want them now? One of those cops was me. I've lost friends. You know what's amazing? Everyone has a right now, the snowflake crowd, to not be offended, right? But my family, everyone, my daughter, my neighbors, if they don't succumb to a narrative and openly pledge allegiance, raise their hand and swear an oath to the allegiance of a group that's called for dead cops now.
See how easy it works? Tucker Carlson showed an old clip that, albeit had some incendiary stuff, pigs in a blanket, fry like bacon. I didn't hear any of them say, kill the cops. I think what they meant was that a cop who has killed an unarmed black man should get the death penalty, is what my interpretation of that was. But Tucker Carlson interpreted it for us, said, kill the cops. And now this smaller megaphone, who has all but 2 million followers on Facebook, is now convinced, and he's saying that it just happened this past week or so. Pigs in a blanket, fry like bacon, kill the cops. And in fact, this was a clip taken from 2015. But Tucker's good because he put that little blurb there that said the date and time that this was taken, and then when he came in behind it to talk about it, he just used English and brought it right into the context of now. And this gentleman who I guess he's been, taking the TV evangelist acting course to, I'm one of them. I was one of them. I've dead friends. I'm sure you do. You have your bona fides, and it's just sad to see that somebody can be so easily taken in, and because you have a pretty big megaphone, 2 million followers, anybody that missed Tucker Carlson is getting it, from a secondary source, and now it's worse. And now it's happening right now. They were out there saying this, pigs in a blanket, fry like bacon, kill the cops, just recently. That's what Black Lives Matter is all about.
Black Lives Matter does not explain that part. No one asked them. You could be fired for asking. What you cannot be punished for, however, is looting and burning, at least not if you're Black Lives Matter. Huge parts of our urban landscape have been destroyed in the past month. Almost no one has been held to account for it. Just the opposite. You're encouraged to pretend it never happened. In St. Louis, every rioter arrested has been released without charges. In New York, hundreds were released without bail. Same in Washington, D.C. It's happening almost everywhere, and not just in places controlled by elected Democrats, which tells you a lot. Fort Worth, Texas, for example, is one of the few major American cities that is led by a Republican, Mayor Betsy Price. On May 31st, a crowd of Black Lives Matter demonstrators blocked a bridge in downtown Fort Worth. When police arrived to disperse them, they threw rocks and bottles of bleach. 3 police officers were injured. The mob then went on to loot and vandalize businesses. Dozens of rioters were arrested for this. 10 days later, the city's police chief, Ed Krause, announced that he was dropping all charges against them. Krause issued a statement suggesting that the real criminals in the riot were not the rioters, but his own police officers, whom he suggested would be reined in and perhaps punished. Quote, "This is just one step on a long journey," Krause wrote, sounding more like a therapist than a cop. The chief promised that his department was, quote, "committed to walking the path of reform with our community." Krause never bothered to explain exactly what his cops had done wrong. They were cops. That was enough. That same day, the Fort Worth School Board issued a statement declaring that, quote, "police practices are deeply rooted in white supremacy." Once again, no one specified which police practices reflected white supremacy or what that accusation even meant.
Are you getting angry yet? Well, I can tell you that the subtitle graphics, you're encouraged to forget about the riots. This is a sort of subliminal. If you're angry and you're following along his dialogue and the pictures, you're mentally going to make a note, I'm never going to forget about these riots. He also said something to the effect of, large areas or whatever were destroyed and so forth. I would argue that in terms of the protests and the area of ground that's been covered all over this country, there was actually surprisingly little damage done as compared to previous riots. And then he goes on to talk about the Republicans bowing to the pressure of Black Lives Matters and so forth, again, to keep you riled up. And then the outrage of which police practices were rooted in white supremacy. Well, for a smart guy, Tucker, I think it's the practice of killing people like George Floyd.
It'll be interesting to know what happens to the murder rate in Fort Worth over the next year. We can guess. We're seeing it all over the country. We've seen it many times through the years. When the people in charge undermine the law, violence surges.
When people make blanket statements in an authoritative tone, other people believe them.
65 years ago, politicians throughout the American South refused to submit to the Supreme Court's Brown versus Board decision. Authorities in many states simply ignored the law like it didn't exist. Armed extremist groups filled the vacuum. They used violence to make their own laws. Ultimately, the federal government stepped in and restored order. In 1957, President Dwight Eisenhower federalized the National Guard of Arkansas. He sent troops to Little Rock to force Governor Orville Faubus to obey the law.
Did you really just drop Brown v. Board of Education? And you said Brown versus Board, and then you failed to give any actual details that might let people understand that this was the case where the federal government had to go in to let black students attend school, and you used this to support your argument. This works on so many levels because for those idiots that like to watch you and quote you, um, your argument just makes sense. We did it before. But for those more knowledgeable people, who are supporters of your brand of racism, then it works as well because they know very well what you're talking about, and they're happy to see that you're getting it over on the dummies. I tried really hard, but we've run out of time. It's getting late. I said I would post this tonight, and so I've got some work to do yet before it's tomorrow. I just want to take this opportunity to point out that the rally that Trump will be holding tomorrow, it's my prediction that this will become a super spreader event, and that these people who attend the rally will come back home and be spreading coronavirus all over the place. The other prediction I have is that Trump and his people will go to great lengths to keep themselves isolated from the mob of supporters, at least isolated via the air that they breathe. And that there will be great efforts taken to hide the fact that I think many in the crowd will be wearing masks. They may segregate them so that the Fox News cameras can only focus on that portion of the crowd that's carefree and maskless. I don't know for sure if that's how it's going to go, but I definitely want to predict that these people will be spreading coronavirus all over the place when they return home. And well, we'll talk about coronavirus again at another time. Thanks for coming. Hope to see you again.